2877 The King's Witch. Some time later, Mordred was leaning on the wall in the circular hall containing the stone archway. The Princess of Shadows was on the lower floors of the Ebony Tower, looking around. He had cleaned the floor, so it was as spotless as before. There was also a foldable army cot in the hall now, on which Song of the Fallen was laying, unconscious. Really, now, this woman is going to sleep through the end of the world. Well, maybe not the end of the world, but the end of the Longing Domain, for sure. At that moment, finally, the blind seer stirred. Mordred could not see if she had opened her eye because of the bloodied blindfold covering it, but he was pretty sure she was awake now. Song of the Fallen, Cassia, sat up slowly and leaned on the wall, facing him. Her face was expressionless. How long was I out? Her tone was even, too. Mordred smirked. Talk about spending too much time with Changing Star. Was the inability to emote infectious? He shrugged. A few hours. Reading a silent question on her motionless face, he added. It's all over. Nightingale surrendered Ravenheart to Seishan and her sisters. He is being tortured now. It's not pretty. Raised by wolves, meanwhile, is chained in a stone cell underneath Mirage Castle. I think they are planning to starve her. That is probably going to be even harder to stomach. Mordred smiled, amused by the pun, then shook his head. There are a few people here and there who have proved to be highly resistant or even immune to the plague. They are being cleansed as we speak. But those who are too valuable, like your friends, are not that lucky. The Dreamspawn is going to weaken and drive them to the edge first, all to compromise their resistance and take them when they're ready to give up. He sighed. Good old torture never goes out of fashion, it seems. Well, you'd know better. Poor Thane, of all the saints in existence, Changing Star just had to go off on the most harmless one. Cassie lowered her head and fell silent, seemingly trying to cope with the dreadful weight of defeat. Mordred chuckled and raised his hands, clapping slowly. Wow, and I thought myself a good actor. You really are a talent, Song of the Fallen. But, please, enough with the theatrics. No need to act so surprised. Cassie sighed. Whatever do you mean? Mordred gave her a bright smile, even though she could not see it. Oh, it's just that I couldn't help but notice the manner in which you arrived at the Ebony Tower. That archway was built by Nether, you know. And Nether was a demon of a very practical sort. Instead of building a gateway between his temporary workshop and the Ivory Tower, he simply patched into an existing network of local path AYS that Hope had created in her kingdom. Local being the key word, this archway was supposed to remain inoperable while the Tower of Hope was away from the Chained Isles, but somehow, it wasn't. He shook his head. Which means that you modified the runic circle of the archway on the Ivory Island, at some point, well in advance. Which means that you had already predicted what would happen if Changing Star and the Lord of Shadows failed to do whatever it is they were trying to do, and prepared an escape route. Which means that you already knew that the Longing Domain would fall. So, no matter how good your acting is, this surprised act really fails to look convincing. Mordred looked at her with an amused smile. What are they doing, by the way? Changing Star and the Lord of Shadows. Cassia remained motionless for a few moments, tracing her hand across the cot to figure out what she was sitting on. I don't know. I don't remember. Mordred chuckled. Oh, I see, you must have erased your own memories of knowing, then. How thorough. Well, it doesn't really matter anymore. Whatever it was that they hoped to achieve, they are already too late. Cassia did not seem to agree, but she did not say anything to contradict him. Mordred stopped smiling. You really are a terrifying witch, you know. No diviner, not even you, can see the future anymore. And yet, you still predicted everything that would happen, to a T. She stayed quiet for a short while, then said reluctantly. Not everything. Mordred studied her somberly. So, you must have predicted what I would do, as well. Otherwise, you wouldn't have dared to take refuge in my lands. I am not sure if you are foolish or just that confident. I came very close to killing you, you know. Cassie faced him calmly, then shrugged. Sure, I predicted your actions and reactions, as well. Mordred's smile turned a little vicious. He did not like her arrogant attitude at all, however, he held himself back. Oh, am I that predictable? His tone was cold and ominous. Cassie lingered for a while, then offered him a smile of her own. Of course, there is no one more predictable than you. Still sitting on a low cot, she raised her head a little to better face him and added. All you care about is survival. That is how beasts are, not humans. What's so difficult about predicting the actions of a beast? Mordred laughed. You do realize that you are a mere transcendent, right? And such a weak one, at that. Oh, don't get me wrong, I know how fearsome you are. But that is only when you have ample time to prepare, and when you aren't facing an overwhelming foe. That's me, by the way, an overwhelming foe. I can end you with a thought, Song of the Fallen. Actually, I am quite tempted to. She tilted her head a little. But you won't, will you? Because you need me if you want to survive. Mordred let out an exasperated sigh. You must be thinking, look, I am the only one who can erase the influence of the Dreamspawn from his mind. So, surely, I am safe. But, Cassia, do you really think that I will let you anywhere near my memories? That I will just invite you into my head and let you run amok? Think about it, really. From my point of view, you are no different from the Dreamspawn. Why would I exchange having my mind manipulated by him for having it manipulated by you? He shook his head. I've always been wary of you, to be honest. Well, perhaps not at the start. Back when you first came to the Night Temple as a freshly awakened youth, I was quite fascinated, watching you and your cohort from my mirror cage. It was a bit of a remedy for my boredom, and such a palatable one at that. But when I realized that you manipulated events to help me break free, I've grown suspicious of how much you seem to know. Mordred exhaled slowly. Later, as I watched everyone dance to your tune without even realizing it, let alone suspecting the meek and unassuming Lady Cassia, I found the fact of your existence increasingly unsettling. You might have blinded everyone else to your true nature, Changing Star, the great clans, the government, and all the rest, but I could always see just how devious and eerily effective at manipulating things you were. And that was before the Tomb of Ariel, even. After, well, even if nobody else seems to see it, I know what you are. I know what you're hiding. Cassia had been listening to him nonchalantly, but just then, she finally showed a reaction. Raising her eyebrow, she asked, "Oh, and what am I?" Mordred chuckled. "I'm the king of nothing, after all, so let's start from what you are not. You are not even a person anymore, are you? You are just a shell of a person, wrapped in a pretty bow." Cassia just sat there, emotionless, facing him silently. Eventually, she said, "Takes one to know one." Mordred laughed. Indeed, but we are a bit different, are we not?" She shrugged. "How so?" He leaned forward a little. "My condition is the result of my flaw. Yours, however, yours is self-inflicted, isn't it?" Cassia frowned slightly, more out of politeness, to show some kind of reaction, as opposed to genuine concern. "What do you mean?" Mordred studied her for a moment, then leaned back again. "Come on, it doesn't take a genius to figure out a few things about the thing that none of us can figure out. I am talking about what happened to us in the Tomb of Ariel, about the vast swaths of our memories that are missing. All of us suffered some loss of memory, but you suffered the most. Didn't you?" He looked at her with a strange mix of disgust and pity. "There's barely any of you left behind that blindfold. 2,878 shattered beings." Song of the Fallen remained silent, offering no retort to his description. Mordred watched her for a while, then continued. "All of us are missing memories, which is a strange thing. However, it doesn't seem that odd when one learns what your transcendent ability is, does it, Cassia? You wield a power to erase and manipulate someone's memories, and here we are, missing some of our memories. Naturally, you weren't transcendent yet in the third nightmare, but Torment was. She was the one who erased them, wasn't she? Either you lied about her being dead, or that echo of yours slithered into our heads in her stead." Cassia just faced him silently, then shrugged and said in an even tone. "I don't remember." Mordred couldn't help but laugh again. "Right, just like you don't remember where Changing Star and the Lord of Shadows have gone. Because you erased your own memories of knowing." "Right." She did not answer. Mordred gave her a long look, then turned away. "Anyway, it is too much of a coincidence for you not to be involved. The most powerful seer of humanity enters the Tomb of Ariel, and the second she returns, all seers in the world suddenly lose the ability to see the future. Not only that, but all the people who had gone into the pyramid with her are mysteriously missing chunks of their memories, while she gains the ability to play with other people's memories. Only a fool would not suspect you. So, I guess everyone in the world is a fool, except for me. So I'll ask you again, do you think that I am foolish enough to let you touch my memories again?" Cassia remained calm and expressionless. "Yes, because you have no other choice." By then, Mordred was truly amused. "Don't I?" She stayed silent for a while, then sighed. "What is the alternative? What is your plan, Mordred?" What are you going to do without me? He shrugged. Well, it is as you said. I am planning to survive. Song of the Fallen turned her head, facing away from him. What happens after you survive? Her quiet voice was somber. Imagine that you defeated the Dreamspawn. Humanity is gone, and you're left alive on its ruins, victorious and utterly alone. What are you going to do then? He tilted his head a little. Why, I'll continue trying to survive with all my might. There are plenty of things in this terrifying world that can and will destroy me if given the chance, after all. The cursed ones, the unholy ones. I guess I will have to become a god, to start with. Becoming a god in order to survive is a bit of an overkill, but what to do? That is the world we live in. Cassia shook her head. What happens after you've become sacred, after you've become divine? After you defeated all the fallen deities of the dream realm and became both its sole ruler and its sole inhabitant? After you survived, what kind of dull, dreary, unbearable life will you live then, without anyone to share it with you? To witness you, or be witnessed by you? Will it be that much different from being dead? For the first time, Mordred's smile grew a little forced. He remained silent for a while, then scoffed. Who knows? Being a god gives one all kinds of choices, I think. I'll be spoiled with them, for sure. Maybe I'll follow in the footsteps of the demon of destiny and try creating my own race of living beings to keep me company and chase away my loneliness. Perhaps I'll follow the example of the demon of imagination and retreat into the great mirror, to live out 1,000 lives surrounded by reflections. Maybe I will delve into the mists of the hollow mountains and behold the nothing beings, thus giving them shape and making them something. They are my kin, after all. What will a world populated by beings like me look like, I wonder? Mordred smiled. Hell, perhaps I'll shatter myself into a million pieces. The pieces of me will inevitably start killing each, so, I'll see which one of us survives then. Song of the Fallen smiled darkly. I see. I guess you really are spoiled for choices. Mordred chuckled. Isn't it a bit hypocritical, though? Here you are, advocating on behalf of humanity. But, at the same time, you are offering to support me in the battle against the Dreamspawn, knowing full well that my victory would mean the end of humanity. What are you really after, Song of the Fallen? What is your own plan? She hesitated a little, then shrugged. My plan, why not? Let me be honest, for once. My plan is to keep you and the Dreamspawn at each other's throats for as long as possible. I can't let either of you win too swiftly, because that would mean that Nephis and Sunny won't have time to finish what they are doing. You cannot be allowed to win, because that would mean the destruction of humanity. However, you cannot be allowed to lose, either, because that would mean that nothing would stand in the way of the Dreamspawn attempting apotheosis. She faced Mordred once more. As far as I see it, though, you are set to lose terribly at the moment. So, here I am, hoping to help you hold out. Because, unlike what you seem to believe, the longing domain is not gone. It might have been weakened and almost destroyed, but it still exists. It will continue to exist for as long as even a single person believes in it, and that means that it will be able to rise once again, one day. Mordred grinned. Set to lose, huh? Well, she wasn't wrong. Despite being so wary of the Dreamspawn, Mordred had underestimated just how powerful that monster was. No, rather, even in his wildest dreams, he had never imagined that Changing Star and the Lord of Shadows would just disappear, leaving the human domain to be ravaged both by the Dreamspawn and by Mordred himself. Their disappearance made all his calculations meaningless, and as a result, the Dreamspawn took full control of humanity far sooner than Mordred had anticipated. He had been gradually pushing humanity back up to this point, but now that the Dreamspawn controlled it completely, the balance on the battlefield was about to change. Not only would the battle effectiveness of all human armies grow tremendously because of his absolute control, but he himself would not need to hold back anymore. Mordred anticipated that his invasion would slam into an impenetrable wall soon. After that, his forces would slowly be pushed back, and eventually, he would be forced to retreat back into the Hollow Mountains. Even if Astarion was incapable of following him into the White Mist in force, Mordred would not be able to slow the Dreamspawn down from there either. That would mean that the Dreamspawn would be able to attempt apotheosis unopposed, and if he succeeded, then, Mordred was not sure that even nothing would be able to protect him. So, he really couldn't afford to refuse Cassia's offer of assistance. In the absence of Changing Star and the Lord of Shadows, she was the best shield he could find against the Dreamspawn's sinister powers. It was just that he was very reluctant to accept her offer. What a pity. Things would have been entirely different if she were a Supreme, herself. Mordred sighed. You know, of all the people I've met, Cassia, you are the closest to becoming supreme, and maybe the most worthy. After all, you've been bending the world to your will ever since you were an inexperienced youth. He shook his head. However, you will never become supreme. You are simply incapable of attaining supremacy, not without the help of the spell, at least. And even if you do conquer the fourth nightmare one day, supremacy will only be a deadly poison to you. She raised an eyebrow. And why is that? Mordred shrugged. Because you are an incomplete being. With all your memories missing, you are barely a person. Supremacy is an act of imposing your authority on the world and reshaping it according to your will, but how can you reshape the world in your image if you don't even know what your image is? If you don't even remember who you are? Cassia remained silent for a while, then said with a faint smile. That is all right. I don't need to be supreme. Sitting on the throne never suited me, anyway. I am far more comfortable standing in the shadow of the throne. Now, if you agree to my proposal, I will be standing in your shadow. That will be enough. Mordred pushed himself off the wall, walked over to the cot she was sitting on, and knelt in front of her. Leaning forward to face her up close, he smiled darkly and said in a low tone. Let's not talk about shadows, shall we? Instead, how about you take off that blindfold? Let's not waste any time, Cassia. She remained motionless for a while, then asked. I take it you agree to my offer. Mordred smiled. Didn't you already know that I'll agree? Ah. Wouldn't it be great if we both were able to survive, Cassia? Of course, there is a good chance that we won't. But I am willing to give it my all. I am planning to live longer than you, at the very least. So, I won't kill you yet. In exchange, you will make sure that my mind is free of the Dreamspawn's influence. She lingered for a moment, then sighed and raised her hand to pull the blindfold down. I am not looking forward to this. Mordred tended to agree. However, he didn't want to let his trepidation show in front of her, even if she would be able to see a memory of him feeling trepidation soon. So, Mordred lied. I, on the contrary, am looking forward to this quite a bit. As far as lies went, that one wasn't very convincing. 2879 That which endures. Rain had been left to her own devices. The King of Nothing, that was who the tall man with peculiar mirror-like eyes had turned out to be, escorted her to the lower floors of the Ebony Tower. The floor beneath the archway hall was apparently deadly for most humans, so she had to be guided down with a blindfold obscuring her vision. Rain thought that it was just an excuse to hide something from her, but when she felt her skin crawl and an eerie sensation penetrate her heart as they walked down the stairs, she realized that the King of Nothing had told the truth on this particular occasion. He seemed trustworthy, in general, charming, even. The man was nothing if not pleasant and treated her with graceful manners, even if his sense of humor was a bit off-putting at times. Needless to say, he did not resemble the bloodthirsty psychopath the rumors painted him to be one bit. That only made Rain more wary of him. I wasn't sure at first, but now my gut tells me that if anything, the rumors about him were too mild. That was because he seemed too normal. Rain loved her brother and was very fond of Lady Neffes, but even she had to admit that all Supremes seemed to have a screw loose. The fact that the King of Nothing was so adept at pretending to be sane only went to show that he was, without a doubt, the most deranged of them all. Still, he had not shown any immediate hostility toward them. Cassie also seemed well acquainted with the man. Well, of course she was, even if Rain wasn't privy to many secrets, she knew that they had conquered both the second and the third nightmare together. So, there seemed to be some history between the two that she wasn't aware of. It was just a shame that Cassie was still unconscious. Rain was reluctant to leave the blind woman alone with the King of Nothing, but there was nothing she could do about it. After all, it was not like she could do anything to stop a Supreme. Even if she stayed on the uppermost floor, she would not be able to accomplish much. So, Rain went about settling the hollow remnant of Smile of Heaven in first. Luckily, the Ebony Tower seemed well stocked and fitted for humans to live comfortably. After finding a spare room for the expressionless woman and making sure that she was comfortable, Rain returned to the main hall, which mirrored the gateway hall of the Ivory Tower, and finally found herself being able to take a deep breath and think. Sinking into a chair, Rain stared at the tall ceiling in a daze. Damnation! She was struggling to digest everything that had happened. Waking up ascended, escaping the Ivory Tower, and becoming a house guest of a supreme serial killer, it was a lot to process. Someone had a lot of explaining to do, but the only person who could explain everything to Rain was currently unconscious. She remained in the chair for a while. Then, she summoned the green canteen and drank some water. That reminded her that she was covered in sweat, soot, and quite a fair bit of blood. A shower would be nice, or better yet, a trip to the bathhouse. Sadly, Rain was not comfortable doing any of those things yet. The King of Nothing seemed to have left her alone, but he was undoubtedly watching her every move. So, she preferred not to do anything compromising without discussing boundaries with the creepy sovereign first, just in case. Letting out a sigh, she summoned the bag of withholding, pulled out some snacks, and enjoyed them in silence. Then, Rain stood up and walked around the ground floor of the Ebony Tower, exploring its interior. She sat on the floor and meditated while guiding the flow of her essence. It was truly astonishing. The lever of control over it she could exert as an ascended was 10 times more refined and precise than what she had been capable of as an awakened, even with the help of the Mark of Shadows. She was going to have to relearn how to move her body from scratch. That will be a lot of work. Rain jumped to her feet and performed a set of simple exercises. She sprinted a short distance, jumped, crouched, lifted a few lumbering pieces of furniture, held her breath, summoned her bow, drew its string a few times. Wow. Rain was shocked. Her physical prowess had increased by orders of magnitude, so much so that she was having trouble controlling her immense strength. She felt fiercely strong, disgustingly mighty, astoundingly powerful. Like she wasn't even a human anymore. And that was without even learning how to properly enhance her ascended body with essence, which was the main reason why masters were so insurmountably stronger than awakened. Wow. Rain shook her head. And then there was her ascended ability, which Rain still had no idea about. She could explore her aspect slowly and learn what she had become capable of over time, or ask Cassie, who was like a surrogate version of the nightmare spell in that sense. But Cassie was unconscious, which meant that all Rain could do was continue dying of curiosity. Instead of actually dying, she went about exploring the Ebony Tower. The first floor was taken by the Great Hall, the living quarters, and by various facilities. The second floor was drowning in heat. There was an enormous brazier there, full of brilliant divine flame. The third floor, Rain was stuck for a while on the TGD floor. That was where the workshop of Nether, the demon of destiny, had been. Nothing of importance remained there, of course, but simply being close to the tools that a deity had once used and the scraps of his discarded projects was an incredible experience for Rain. Information about the demons was scarce, but considering who her brother was, she knew more than most. The Prince of the Underworld was somewhat of a personal idol for Rain. He had been the divine builder, after all, the architect and engineer who had created the Stone Saints, crafted incredible artifacts, and built an entire civilization in the underworld. Actually, this entire tower is a monument he had left behind. So was the Ivory Tower, in fact, a monument left behind by a deity. So was the Great Castle, the Jade Palace, the Night Garden. The gods were dead, and the people who had worshipped them were long gone. But the things they had built remained, having endured the world-ending calamity. Rain found the fact that they still stood, sheltering humans, deeply reassuring. Beautiful, really. Promising herself to spend more time in Nether's workshop later, she ascended the stairs with a feeling of wonder in her heart. There, she found the shrine of Storm God. The statue of the elusive goddess of the black skies was drowning in darkness, so lifelike as to almost look alive. Her visage had been carved from stone with such skill that the fabric of the gossamer veil obscuring her face seemed to move slightly in the wind. The graceful lines of her inhumanly stunning face could almost be seen behind the veil. Rain felt peculiarly drawn to the nebulous statue and spent a long time looking at it, mesmerized. Eventually, she sighed and tore her gaze away from the altar of Storm God, feeling an odd sense of poignant emptiness. The higher floor was where the King of Nothing warned her to never enter without a blindfold, so Rain descended to the ground floor once again. She was thinking about finding a place to rest when another staircase caught her attention. This one led down, disappearing underground. After some hesitation, Rain descended the stairs and entered a large underground chamber. There, pieces of porcelain mannequins were strewn about, staring at her with eerily beautiful faces. They were not what drew her attention, though. In the center of the chamber, someone had cleared out a wide space and installed a tall, towering mirror there. A person who was not supposed to be there reflected from the surface of the mirror. It was a reflection of the King of Nothing, at least Rain thought that it was his. The man was sitting on the reflection of the stone floor, looking down. His figure was the same, and his face was the same, however, his clothes, the length of his hair, and even his very presence were entirely different. He looked much gentler. Damn psychopath, damn. Rain backed up, not wanting to disturb the King of Nothing, but at that moment, the reflection raised its head and looked at her silently. "Then," he smiled. "Oh, you must be Rain. It is nice to meet you. I am Mordred." He paused for a moment, and then added with a sigh. "The other Mordred, that is."